find your own rhythm, do the work, just do the work, and be patient. And if you do those things, and you set your sights on reality, you always want to hope and dream, but if you set your sights really on reality, the business will come to you.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled Show. This is a show about people who were successful in a previous career that left that career to go down a different path. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And I'm your co-host, Bill Zahller.
On today's show, we have Larry Schatz. Larry, we're so glad you're with us and that you took the time. So thank you very much. And Bill, take it away.
Yeah, Larry, thanks for being on the Road Less Travel Show. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah. Larry, can you tell us a little bit about your former career and how long you were on that path?
Well, it actually it was kind of circuitous. We were just chatting before we went on air. I was actually an engineer originally. I was recruited out of college by General Electric. Was part of their training program, and they kind of swung me to different locations. I wound up in New York City, and I stayed. Left GE to go into the television industry and started out at CBS as a young guy in finance, and then kind of moved through the television and media industry, having several jobs in marketing and in sales. Ultimately, for my own company, the Randolph Media Group, where I represented a number of other companies for digital and content sales as well. So I spent a good 35 years in the media and advertising industry, and that had always been a moving target. I mean, I was there back in the day when there were 3 television networks, and you turn on a show. If you didn't have a rating of a 20 plus, you were off the air. Now, if you have a rating of a 2+, you're a hit. so the industry has become quite
100 episodes for that one.
Right, yeah. Exactly. That's exactly right. 100 episodes. The industry has become quite fragmented, and we saw that with cable television coming into play in the 80s and in the early 90s, and obviously once the digital world started to take hold and digital streaming started to take hold. I actually was with in the early 90s, a very early digital streaming services provider. And I recall going out to meetings with television broadcasters, talking to them about video on the web. And this was at a time, if we all recall, and people watching here recall, they may not, there was something called dial-up, where the idea of getting anything through video on the web was impossible. You could barely get a photograph downloaded. But we were pioneering that, and we would go into meetings with broadcasters, and they were on one hand interested, and on the other hand frightened. And it was really quite stunning. We did a number of deals with local television stations to provide webcasts of their news broadcasts. So I was involved with that. I also did the very first deal with the PGA Tour, live at 17. If you ever watch the Players Championship and you're a golfer, there's one hole, a famous hole in Ponte Vedra, the stadium course. It is an island green. It's a 17th hole. And, the idea behind the webcast would be, everybody would love to just watch the pros hit the ball in the water, right? Because it's and fortunately, the first couple of days, it was a strong wind, and a lot of them did. And, but networks being as they were, we were only allowed to webcast on a Thursday and a Friday, even though, the tournament went through the weekend, and the network would not allow us to webcast over the weekend. But that was our very first, and the PGA Tour stayed with it. So it was, there were interesting times watching the change of the industry and watching things to move more digitally. And, in my career, I kind of did the same and followed suit with that, working on the advertising agency side and then to my own business. And then, reached a point where the business became so fragmented, it was so difficult to scale. My wife was retiring. And we started looking around at perhaps our next move as my industry was starting to change. And, we settled on Asheville, North Carolina. And I got my real estate license about 5 years ago. Started doing real estate in New York. Started doing actually residential real estate in New York. Realized that I absolutely hated it. And then somebody said, well, you ought to try commercial. And I did. I really liked it. And I was actually starting to do business there, which was great, recognizing that now I'm going to have to leave and start all over again. And so that's what I did. And I figured, guy from New York coming to Asheville, North Carolina, piece of cake. No. It was a totally different world, long-standing relationships in a small town, much different scale of business. And, kind of had to rework and relearn the business from a small town perspective, which fortunately, I think I'm starting to find my place 4 years later. So I'm loving it here, loving the work that I'm doing. And, we're, hope to see, a good year in 2022.
That's great. Well, as you transitioned into the commercial real estate in Asheville, is there anything you're specifically focused on at this point in the commercial side of it?
Well, in a small town, most of the brokers are doing a little bit of everything. There's just not a lot of business, at least locally, that will, pay the bill, save for a few brokers that really handle a tremendous amount of retail or a tremendous amount of industrial. That being said, I started, and I kind of fell into this as well. I lived in apartments all my life. I lived in New York City. I know apartment buildings. I was on the board of my cooperative apartment building in New York as well, and kind of understand how they operate. So I kind of got that. So I tended to gravitate towards multifamily, and I also, not only from a brokerage standpoint, but also from an investment standpoint, I started looking at that as well. And I ended up falling in with two fronts. One with private equity that is looking to acquire and dispose of these days acquire multifamily buildings and projects, and also developers who are looking to develop along those lines. So I'm kind of still in the process of creating that niche for myself here that extends beyond just the city of Asheville, but into the state and really even outside of the state. So that's really where I'm focusing right now, and it's so far so good.
Oh, great.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that I could ever be a residential agent. The idea of driving mom and dad and kids screaming in the back with throwing Cheerios at me while I'm driving. No, I don't think I can handle that. So,
and I'm kind of doing that right now with some friends of mine from high school. They want to move to the area, and lovely people. I love them. Yeah. They're great, and they're really a lot of fun to be around. But it's the typical, buyer that wants to come in from out of town, and the market's tight. Mm-hmm. And I've spent more time with them. I enjoy the time that I'm spending with them, but it just reminded me why I'm not doing residential real estate.
Right.
In case I was wondering.
So even though they're older, you still have a no Cheerios rule, right?
No Cheerios rule.
Right.
No Cheerios in the car.
They're grown-ups.
Good. Okay, good. Yeah. Well, so speaking of car, I'm actually in the car right now. I've got a circumstance going on that prevents me from being in my normal studio. So bear with my background. But anyway, so Larry, is there a funny story that you can share? Something humorous along the way? Maybe back from your engineering or your media days that made you scratch your head and kind of say, "Why am I doing this? I gotta rethink things." Anything along that line you can share?
Well, it's interesting. You kind of, I don't know if there's anything one in particular, but you kind of go through life in a career, and you're always reassessing. Mm-hmm. I probably made the big mistake very early on, saying to myself, money doesn't matter. I just want to do what I really want to do and be happy with it. And I finally, tripped and fell enough up the stairs that I ended up making money. But I probably could have done so a little bit better earlier on without as much work. But you're constantly reassessing and doing different things. And I'll tell you also that one of the things that I discovered is that as you go through your career, don't be afraid of change, and don't be afraid of making adjustments. And I think this show kind of speaks to that in a lot of ways, right? I had a situation where a dear friend of mine was murdered. We were going to go into business together, and we were literally this is my dog, by the way, Hudson, who wants to look out.
Your coworker, right? Your coworker.
Yeah, he's gonna. Yeah, right. So this is. I don't do this. There may be. He may be taking action. But I was in a situation where we were literally 2 weeks away from changing careers and starting our own company. He was killed, and I ended up going forward anyway. And it took me on a whole nother trajectory. And I was pretty successful at the beginning, and ended up going back to it a little bit later on because I'd gotten a job in between, a couple of jobs in between. What it did for me was I basically lost the fear factor. I wasn't afraid of the change. I wasn't afraid if something happened, I knew that I would come out of it okay and maybe better. Mm-hmm. And when I made the transformation here into real estate, I felt the same way. And in fact, it's true. The change was a lot of work, a lot of effort, still is. But don't be afraid. Is really something that came out of what really came out of, for me.
Well, on that point, Larry, was there a defining moment that made you want to transition from the real estate? From the media path you were on to the real estate, or was it just something evolved over time, or was there any particular factor, or just something?
There was. Again, my wife was retiring, mm-hmm. and we were in New York in a co-op there. And my business was changing. Again, I was just going back to the way the business was becoming more fragmented. I was a smaller company representing content that really wasn't, I had no levers to pull. I had great relationships in the industry, and been around for a while, and I could open up any door. But if you don't have the goods that have enough scale, it's hard to make a living out of that. So I'm at this time in my early 60s, and saying, well, maybe there's a job for me out there. And so I started poking around that front. And again, any door could open up. And, my friends who are all very, that have big jobs, that are senior guys, go see this guy, go see that girl, woman. And figure this, I'm interviewed for a job where in some cases, the person I'll be reporting to might be an EVP or a senior vice president who's about 15 years my junior, and I know all their bosses. So, that doesn't work. And so I think then, we said, well, you know what, maybe it is time for a change and, get out of New York. And I've been living there for over 30 years. My kids grew up there. And, Nancy, my wife, was ready. And, we came to Asheville, North Carolina, really for a vacation, not thinking that we were going to move, just to kind of check it out. My wife loves the mountains, not really a beach person. I didn't really care one way or the other, although I ride motorcycles. So, I trail about one of my bikes down here to do a bunch of riding, if you could do a little bit of real estate. I ended up doing very little riding, a lot of real estate. We came back with a house. And, it was actually, this is before I was in real estate. It was actually a good real estate deal because I bought a house that was under construction in a development. And it was a section of the development being out by a single builder. And I said to him that, okay, we'll buy the house if I can lease it back to you as a model home. Mm-hmm. And he did, covered my costs. And then we ended up leasing it for another year, not knowing whether or not we were going to really move down here or not, always knowing that we could sell. It was a hot market even then. And then we pulled the trigger. So, it was really, just getting back to your question, it was really more of, my industry changed to the point where in order to, create the income that I really wanted to do to live the way we wanted to live in New York, really was becoming more and more difficult. And why make ourselves crazy? And I'd already peaked in my career, and it was all good, but made the switch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Yeah.
Nice. It's funny. Two things. First, I used to have a former client that was a print media company, and you can imagine what kind of decimation has happened in that field. So they were making massive changes and trying to figure out a way to survive, and it was crazy. And then, coincidentally as well, actually, I have a good friend up in Richmond who did the same thing. He bought a house and leased it back to the builder as a model. And I'm like, wow, imagine that. You got a house that gets basically floor traffic and during the day, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
it worked. It worked great until these builders were kicked off the island. Long story. And, I was wise enough to charge these guys a penalty for getting out of the lease early.
Oh, good.
Penalized for that. And then I got another renter in that kept it for another year, and they were immaculate. I mean, they didn't do much outside, but they kept the inside immaculate. We were going to do landscape anyway.
Right.
And
nice.
So it all worked out.
Yeah.
Nice. So Larry, as you start moving where you are in the field you're in now and doing real estate, et cetera, were there some obstacles you encountered? You mentioned, certainly, of course, you thought it was going to be snap, no problem, go.
Right.
For a little longer. What were some of those obstacles?
So here's I'll give you an example. When I was in New York doing retail, and I was representing some clients that were looking at restaurant space and all of that kind of retail space around the city, retail rents were going anywhere from $250 to $500 a foot in rent.
Wow.
The same space in Asheville, North Carolina, is going for anywhere between, at that time when I came here, anywhere between $20 and $30 a foot for rent. So
basically 1/10.
Right. So then you say to yourself, okay, and and by the way, the leases are year to year. I mean, the leases are 1-year leases. The long leases here are 3-year leases. In New York, the leases are 5 years with a 5-year option. Right. So, you kind of look at these things and you say, well, how am I going to make that work? From an income standpoint on leasing, right? And you kind of start out doing leasing here because nobody really wants to do it, right? So that for obvious reasons. And then you can extend that. You can extend that into office leasing. You can extend that even into the price of property and so forth. So that was one obstacle. The other was recognizing that there were longstanding families and folks in town that are not only brokerages, but they're also big property owners and developers. And so they're controlling a lot of the good A properties that are around. So trying to find, a proper piece of land or a building that you're going to represent that will likely be taken by one of the larger, more well-established brokerages that have been here, and they know everybody in town, and so you have that. The one thing I did have going for me was a good friend of mine that grew up in Haywood County. His father was mayor of Maggie Valley, and we worked together in New York. And I had actually brought him into our company to do some digital stuff for us. And his father wanted to sell some property out at Haywood County. So I started representing his dad. I sold one of his parcels. The other stuff he wanted way too much money for, but I sold one and got to meet a few other folks along the way in Haywood County. So that started the ball rolling out there to some extent, and stayed out of Buncombe. And that has its own kind of, everybody's related in Haywood County, I'm convinced. So I started doing some work there, and I started doing some work in the historic district of Frog Level in Waynesville. And, one thing always leads to another, and that led to new relationships, new development relationships, and so forth. And that's still going on there. The flip side of that is, in parallel with that, rather, I started developing some relationships with private equity. Who are looking to buy into North Carolina, particularly multifamily. So I started getting involved with them, and those relationships are basically, find us something, we'll pay you. And I said, okay, and I was able to do that. And I'm really finding myself, to move away from some of the challenges of looking for that big listing, working with buyers and working in the off-market arena. So I'm able to find properties for developers that are not on the market, find sellers that are not willing to sell, that have not put anything up, have real discussions with them, and do business along those lines. So it's a little bit tougher. I'm very fortunate that, because I had a career beforehand, I have the time to do that, and I can wait on deals to be done. So it kind of puts me in somewhat of a different position than maybe some of the other younger brokers who are kind of, banging it out every day. But that's kind of the path that I'm taking right now.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Larry, what was one of the first victories you can think of as you transition to the real estate side of it, whether it be New York or down here in Asheville? I know you've mentioned the raw land deal sales, the lease back on the house. Is there anyone that when you had that victory, you thought, well, I'm on the right path? It kind of solidified that for you?
Yeah, within the first month and a half of getting my license, a buddy of mine has a doctor's office in New York, and he wanted to sublet part of his space. He had about 3,000 square feet of space to sublet at $90 a foot, and and this was an 8-year lease. So he gave me the listing. I put a sign up. We got a sign put up right outside the office building. There's a lot of street traffic in New York. It's on the the Upper East Side. It's at 62nd between. I don't know if you know New York at all, but it's between Lexington Avenue and Park Avenue, and it's a great location. And I leased it up right away. It was great. Have it right away. Got paid. This is easy.
Right. I do 3 of these a week.
yeah. Then I did some doctor's offices in Long Island as well, and I did a few other deals, along the way that happened fairly quickly, largely because I knew the city extremely well. I knew a lot of people, and this was my home. I lived there for a long time, so that was good. That's what they say in real estate. You leverage your friends and your contacts and all that sort of thing, and you come to a new area, and there's little to leverage because everybody else is leveraging theirs, especially if you don't know anybody.
Right.
So now we're here for 4 years, and it's just a matter of finding your way, and do what find what makes sense for you.
Yeah. And probably like you said earlier too, it's even magnified being a small town because it's a much tighter, smaller circle, I think, of people, all the influential people. There aren't as many of them, so they kind of all know each other to begin with. Right.
And and what's interesting about this area is there are so many people from other places. That's that real small town thing where you really have the old line that know each other. You certainly have that here. It's somewhat diluted. So there are those opportunities, and there's also, I found that working with folks here, even the folks that have been that have grown up here, that have family that have lived here for generations, are very open to doing business, with people that do business well. So it works. It does work, but it does take time.
Right.
Yeah. You got to build those new relationships, and and again, once somebody gets to know you and start to trust you, then even though you maybe are an outsider, or you're sort of not local, not from there, they begin to trust you. So good, yeah.
And that's what it's all about, really. It's really that way with the business, right? It's really the building of trust, and if you're genuine and you're honest with folks, you'll typically do okay.
Nice. So Larry, before I go to the next question, again, the next question is, do you have a funny story from what you're doing now? But we've got 2 funny stories from this video already. Number one, your dog that came behind you now is chilled out on the couch, nice taking a nap. But I don't know if the audience can see it, but in my background, all of a sudden behind me in the rear window, there was a hand that reached down from the house that I'm parked in front of. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is that? And it was apparently a lady, a screen had fallen out of her window. And next thing I saw her walking in this window. But anyway, it's a little hard to see. and if you're listening on air, you obviously can't see that. But anyway, Larry, so is there something funny from your current field that you can share?
I'll just tell you, this is a small town. I'll tell you about this one client I have. Had, and I'm not going to name names or where it was from, but this guy is a bit of I wouldn't say he's a curmudgeon, but he's a difficult fellow, and owns a lot of property around Western North Carolina, and apparently he had a run-in with his third wife, so much so that she put a hit out on him. Literally put a hit out on him. And this is just before I got him as a client. And he was telling me the story that I started wondering whether this is the right way to go. Still wondering. But apparently there was a tenant in one of his buildings that told him about it because she approached him to do it. And there was a sting operation with the local police. And they got her rather. And I think she's just getting out of jail now, but she was in jail for a couple of years.
Oh my God. It sounds to me like the movie
so I'm saying to myself, welcome to Western North Carolina. We really do things a little bit differently here.
It's another Tuesday.
It reminds me of the movie The Whole Nine Yards. I mean, and Bruce Willis and whatever other crew, but great movie. But anyway, who knew there was a mafia in Asheville? Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And he really took it in stride. He had an antique shop, and it was one of his storefronts, and he had a big sign in there that said "Dead Man Walking Antiques."
That's funny. Wait, Larry, where are you today in your journey on your new path? I mean, you've talked about kind of what you've done so far and what you're looking to do. Where do you see yourself going with your career here?
Well, again, I'm at a point in my career where I'm not looking to kill it every day. It's really a balance of lifestyle and having some fun and staying busy and working in something you like to do. And certainly making money along the way. I guess maybe it goes back to my earlier story about that not being the number one thing for me. But that being said, I'm really spending most of my time trying to uncover deals for clients. And whether it be the development clients, whether it be acquisition through private equity, and I'm developing those networks. So it's a matter of expanding that. I see myself potentially getting licensed in other states that will allow me to do direct deals. But it's a matter of trying to build up enough deal flow where, if I could do, a couple of deals a year, they're large enough to where it's, I'm perfectly happy with it. And, and I'm able to work at a pace that makes sense for me. So, if I could hit that sweet spot, that's where I'd like to be with it at this stage of my career.
Great. Absolutely.
Yeah. Makes sense. So Larry, along your long storied career that you've, worked in different fields and whatnot and where you are now, is there anything that you and maybe your wife do to try to give back to help other folks along the way in some capacity?
I've been involved with not-for-profits all my career. I was telling you a little bit of a story earlier on when we talked about some challenges. I was telling you about a dear friend of mine that was murdered, a guy that I worked with when we started our own company. His name is John Reisenbeck, and John was an up-and-coming advertising executive. We were both senior VPs of the company that we were with. And his dad was also in the industry as well. So really two generations. When John was murdered, a number of friends of his all got together It was a senseless murder. Crime in New York was at its high point. He and I were actually on the telephone, believe it or not, preparing for a pitch the next morning. This is before cell phones, so his phone was out in his apartment. I'm in my office. He's at a payphone. I'm in my office at a computer. He's at a payphone outside of his apartment building in what's now known as the Meatpacking District, or just in the West Village, just outside the Meatpacking District. At that point, it was that area was kind of sketchy, and he was mugged and shot. And while I was talking to him, I didn't hear the shooting. I heard the mugging. They never found the murderer, and it was a horror. But a bunch of us got together and decided we wanted to do something. We're all, fairly senior people in the media industry. And we did this at his funeral. And a year later, we formed a foundation. I was the founding president of the foundation, founding chair of the foundation, actually. And we are now entering our 30th year. And our mission is to make New York City a better and safer place to live and work. I'm still very much involved, even at a distance, because as being one of the founding members, we still have quite a few founding board members that are still there. That includes the former president of the CBS television network, who likes to say that I was president of the CBS network when it actually meant something.
Yeah.
He's now 92 years old, and he's still at it.
Yeah.
So we've done a tremendous amount of good, throughout the city. I've been involved with the New York City Police Department. We fund Crime Stoppers, educational programs, mentor programs. We're immersed in neighborhoods throughout New York City. And over this last year during COVID, we supported a lot of first responders and a lot of other folks that have been, out of work. I actually executive produced our first television show that we did for the that really spoke to what was happening in New York in 2020, and that aired as a roadblock on all 4 network affiliated stations in prime access. It was a huge fundraiser for us then. We did a second one this year. I stepped away from it this year. The last year was enough. We had Robert Klein doing the voiceovers. It was terrific. Great show. And so I feel really good about the foundation. I've done a lot of work there. And I sat on boards, theater groups and other organizations. I was on through the foundation. We were involved with New York City's first charter school. I was on the board of the charter school. So I've done a fair share of work in the nonprofit area.
Wow, Larry, that's great. Obviously, it's something you feel strongly about, and that's great. And we actually just created a nonprofit foundation ourselves, Bill and myself, called the Park Capital Partners Foundation. And let listeners learn about that rather than distracted from your story. But again, you've done so much. That's great to hear, and really honor to understand that things are passionate for you. So great.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Larry, is there something you've implemented recently in your business that's helped you achieve your goal, whether it be a routine, a CRM, networking, anything you can think of you've done that's really helped you grow?
It's really just doing the work. I've as a matter of fact, I'm going back to I'm not even using a CRM now. I've been using my own notes and all of that. It's probably not the best way to do it, but I've done that all my life. So I'm probably not the best person, in that regard. But I am going to be going on to Client Look, which is a pretty good CRM for commercial real estate. I had it when I was a broker with Keller Williams. I'm now with Tessier. Tessier is doing a killer job throughout the Asheville area. And so I'm going to be moving back into that as a CRM, because I really do need that. It just does make life a lot easier. But I will just tell you, find your own rhythm. If I'm going to give advice to anybody else that's out there, regardless of the career that they're in, find your own rhythm, do the work, just do the work, and be patient. And if you do those things, and you set your sights on reality, you always want to hope and dream, but if you set your sights really on reality, the business will come to you.
That's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah. So you answered the next question already, Larry. Thank you. Good. You knew that you used your Carnac sense to know it was coming, right?
I don't want to jump ahead. How much time do we have left? I don't want to jump ahead.
Well, excellent. Well, Larry, what's the best way for the listeners to be able to reach out and either learn more about the foundation or your current activities with commercial real estate, or just have a conversation with you?
Well, first of all, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, they can email me at larry.schatz@tessiergroup.com, TESSIER group.com. And I'd be happy to chat. That would be the best way to reach me. And if people want to learn more about the John A. Reisenbach Foundation, it's Reisenbach, REISENBACH, ReisenbachFoundation.org, where again, this is our 30th year. This has been, it's a terrific group. And it's really, I think it's a model for anybody that really wants to, do something worthwhile in the cities that they live, in terms of what they support, how they support, where the focus is. I'll just tell you one interesting story about the foundation, about our start, and it's something that's even stayed with me throughout my career. And in part, I think it's an answer to your last question. There was a guy that was on our board. His name was Lynn Makes. He's a publishing guy, and he had given us some advice when we were first starting our organization, still trying to feel out what the mission for the foundation would be. And he says, set your mission, understand who it is you are. And you're gonna realize that there are gonna be a lot of great ideas that will come and go, that could take you in a number of different directions. But he says, I really have two words for you. Those two words are ruthless focus. Stay focused on your mission, put blinders on, stick to that mission. Not saying that you can't adjust, but stick to that mission, stick that you want to do, and put blinders on and do that and do it well. And it was the best advice we had. And it's still a mantra, for us at the organization. And it's also a mantra for me in my business. When I decide to do something, I know what it is, what I want to do, and I want to do that. And I'm not going to get distracted with other things. So I think that, that kind of worked on both ends.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And we've I think covered this on some other shows and from the local real estate meetings that, 1 week we'll have somebody talking about notes, and then it's fix and flip, then it's commercial, then it's self-storage. And it's almost the shiny penny syndrome, that everything sounds great because they're excited when they're talking about it, but no one ever learns anything. They don't go deep, they just go wide, and they don't have success in any of it because they don't specialize, like you said, relentlessly focus on one particular niche to become an expert at it.
Right. It's great to be a generalist to the extent from a knowledge standpoint, but if you want to do business, you got to be an expert in something and figure out what that thing is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I very much strongly believe in that. Got to stay away from the shiny object and focus. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Larry, we'd love to thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show today. We enjoyed the conversation, and we wish you continued success.
Well, thank you. Love being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Larry, thank you so much for being on. Again, we'll put your contact information and the John Reisenbach Foundation information in the show notes. Again, really want to thank you for being on. Also like to thank our listeners. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please continue to listen. Give us a 5-star rating so we can continue bringing more great content from folks like Larry Schatz. Thank you again, Larry. Again, we want to also thank our sponsors. Park Capital Partners sponsors this show. We also happy to talk with anybody about the Park Capital Partners Foundation that's recently been created. And then finally, we also have the Park Capital Value Add Fund that we also are running. Please reach out. We'll be happy to talk with anybody further. And if you'd like to be a guest on this show, please also reach out, and we'll talk to you about that. So thanks everybody for joining. Have an awesome day, and thank you. Remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.